Hello, welcome back. We are building a navigation bar in HTML and CSS for our home page. Where we left off was we had created all the HTML for our page. And what I forgot to do at the end was just to show us what we did on our live preview. So once I hit the save button, this is what my page currently looks like. It's a bit of a disaster, but you can see it's got the structure that we need in order to get it to work, which is it's got a div for the home page, it's got a div for the personal, and then the three subcategories. It's got a div for the tutorials and the subcategories. It's got a div for the graphics and its subcategories. Now, why does it look so crazy? Let's deal with that first. There's like two minor things we're going to do, and then we'll dive into the really cool stuff. So right now in my CSS, I've said that every single div should behave this way. It should have um, it should have a width, it should have a border, right? So even my width 1000, for instance, that's why all these things are sticking out beyond it because they're all 1000 pixels wide. But I don't want all my divs to act that way. I only want my main div to act that way. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to come up to my HTML, and I'm going to make this div have a special class as well. I'm just going to call it the main div. And then down here, instead of saying I want all divs to behave this way, I'm going to say I want this div to behave like the main div. And that should, when I save it, now change. Like now these don't have all those crazy things around them. Now it looks a little bit more organized, though it's obviously not a drop-down menu yet. The second thing I want to do is I want to just take a quick look over how we can change the look of links. So notice that my page is so nice and purple and all matchy, but these links are blue. In fact, when I click on them, they turn red. And so that's really weird. I don't want that to happen. So how do I change the CSS of links? And the reason we're doing this is because obviously all the things we have at the top are links as well. So for instance, if I wanted to give it a new rule and say all my A tags are going to behave a certain way, I just want them to change color. So all my A tags, which are my links, I want to turn into this beautiful shade of lavender. I would do that, and now you can see that they've all changed their color. But beyond that, you can change more things about the A tag. So for instance, every A tag has a subcategory called what happens when they're active. And so maybe I want to change the color of what happens when I click on them. So I would change that to some other beautiful shade of lavender, which of course I looked up on Photoshop to get some different colors. So now, once I save this and everything, this is the kind of thing where it doesn't always work on the live preview until I actually refresh the live preview. Let's see if that works. Or until I go into here and tell it to do the live preview again. So we may have to do this a few times as we work to see what our changes are. So now as I'm clicking, they turn a color. But even better than that is that I can have them change color when I'm just hovering my mouse over them. I want the exact same effect. I just want the color to change when I put my mouse over them, so I'm going to change that. And now it will be the same color when I just put my mouse over it and when I click. And then there's one more, which is after you go to the page and you come back, they change color, and they're usually like a really bad version of purple, not even my beautiful version of purple. So I'm going to change mine so that they look like that. So if they turn purple because they've been visited before, now they're going to stay like that. One other thing you might want to do is in the basic A tag where you have all links should behave a certain way. There's a CSS called text decoration, if I can spell. And you can just set that to none so that they don't get underlined anymore. See, so now they're not even underlined, they're just active when I put my mouse over them. That's how most people do links these days. So I kind of like it that way. Okay, so those are just minor things, but you can see now that there's like such a thing as what happens when I hover over something. And that's the key to making our navigation bar, is to let things happen when we hover over them. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to start adding in the parts we need. If you remember, we made a class called navbar and a class called navgroup and a button called drop and then another class called navitem. So we have to make all of those things change. I'm going to go ahead and put them at the very bottom of my CSS. First one, the navigation bar. How do we want our navigation bar to look? I'm going to do a few that everybody should probably do, and then, well, one that everybody should do, and then the other ones you're going to have to make some adjustments based on what colors and stuff you want. So my first one is that I want there to be a nav bar with a width of 100%, so it goes all the way across the screen, within the parent of it, so it's within the box it's already in. And then I want a background color. So there's where, you know, you definitely want a background color, but the exact background color you want could be different. I'm sticking with my shades of lavender for my page. And so now you can see, of course, the instant change over here. Actually, I'm just going to shrink this up a little bit so you can see my instant changes. I just made a nav bar. It's 100% of my screen. It doesn't fill up the whole thing because my div over here had a little padding around it to make it look nice, but it's now a nav bar. The last thing I want to do, and this is going to make it look really weird for right now, but I want to force it to be a particular height as well. Because I want, once I start doing the drop down, I don't want it to change size every time it shows me a menu. So this is maybe going to be weird because once I set a height, it's going to be like that where it gets really strange, but we'll fix it soon, so don't worry. So what height you want is going to depend on how you want your words to look. So you can change the 55 to adjust to how you want it to be, but you don't really know that yet. So right now, maybe just do something like 55 like I did. Okay, now we want to group these things so that they're not down the page, but they're actually next to each other. So let's change our nav groups. These, I think, are going to be the same for everybody. So just go along with what I do and it should work. So first of all, I say they're relative to each other instead of in an absolute position. And then the big one is when I change the display from the typical display to an inline block. Let's spell that correctly. And see, now they're next to each other. So that automatically puts them all right next to each other. Now they're all over the place because of the different subcategories. And so the last thing I want is I want to change the vertical alignment. Oops. Vertical align, and I want them all to line up on the top. And then that changes them to look like that. So now they are starting to actually look like something. Well, to make them look even better, let's change those buttons, because right now those buttons look too much like actual buttons, and I want them to look like a better menu system. So I am going to change the look of the drop. What's interesting here is that I'm also going to change not just the look of the drop, but I'm going to change the look of any links that are inside the drop. So I call it drop A. So by doing this .drop A, it's saying make both of those things act the same. It's just a shortcut because otherwise I just have to copy and paste later. So I want to change actually, hold on, let me do it in a different order. Let's put the ones on there that we definitely want everybody's to do, and then we'll put the colors on the bottom. Now, when I say everybody wants to do these, you still might want to make changes to it depending on your exact look. But a little padding around these things to make them a little bit bigger would look nice. I would change the font size of them. Oops. This live preview is nice because I know when I've made a mistake because it doesn't do it. I don't want a border around them, so I'm going to set the border to be 0. Right now when I go over them, my cursor, my mouse, oh yeah, look at that. It becomes a little finger by default because they're a button. But when I put my mouse over, oh, for all of them it becomes a finger. That's handy. But if you wanted to override that, you can make your cursor something else. And there's a lot of different things you can make. I want my cursor to be a pointer. I think that is the finger anyway. Oh no, yeah, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm putting that in there just to make sure it behaves the way I want. Because right now Chrome's behaving, but I don't know if other ones behave. This seems to be working already anyway, but I'm going to make sure that my text decoration is none so it doesn't format them with any sort of underlines or anything. And then finally, the two big ones, background color, where you decide what you want the background color to be. What I like to do is I like to make it the exact same color as my navigation bar. That makes them look kind of invisible. Oh, it didn't do it. I'm going to have to save this and refresh it, I guess. And then my color, I'm going to make something else. And for me, I just found a nice off-white beige is going to look nice. Let me hit save on those things and refresh it to see what we got. Honestly, it doesn't seem like it really did anything. I'll worry about that later, but I wonder if I should just say I want all my drops to behave this way. Let me just do this first. Yeah, there we go. So it did not like me doing the two at the same time. That's too bad. I just read something online that said you could do that, and then mine's not actually doing that. So for right now, maybe we'll just keep that. And if I have a problem, I'll come back and fix what happens for the links inside of them. That's looking better. That's more like what I want. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to change what happens to these links, these groups, when I put my mouse over them. So that's just like we did with the links before. I want to change the drop. Nope, sorry, I don't want to change the drop anymore. I want to change the nav group. And I want to say what happens when I hover. And in fact, yeah, so there's two things we want. No, actually there's one thing we want here, which is when I make the nav group hover, when I put my mouse over here, what I actually want, I don't want these to change. I want the drop-down menus to change. So when I change my nav group hover, I actually want the nav item to change. So this one we're doing two things again. This is the things that'll make them actually start behaving properly. I want them to act like a block. I want their position to be relative to where they were before. I want them to have some padding around them. And I want to make sure they don't turn into regular links, which they shouldn't do because I've changed all links to not have underlines, but I'm going to double make sure. Now, so when I hover, it's changing the links to different colors. Right now we're not seeing a lot of change in the actual groups, but it'll change soon. Because here's the big one. Where's my big one? is that we are going to change how those nav items work. So here's the shocking one. How do we want to display the nav items? We actually don't want them to be there. See, so that's the big change. When I, by default, they are going to have no display. But then when I hover over the group, the display changes to a block. So that's what does that. So that's how they work as drop downs. So they're not perfect yet, but that is the big change that makes everything kind of run. So what else do we do for our nav items? Well, now we can start making them look like how we think they would look better than what they currently do. So for instance, I think the background color should change when I make them show up so that they stick out a little bit more, right? Notice also the font is not the same as my other pages. Actually, a lot of my fonts aren't working now that I look at it. Somewhere I thought I changed my font. Huh. Oh, yeah. Yeah, up here. That's sad. I guess this font is not installed on this computer, so that makes me a little sad. Display, background color, the color of the words themselves. Again, I'm going with my lavender. And then these things are where you can make, so that's like the basic look of them. Now here's some ones that are a little bit stranger. This one's pretty cool. It's that we can make that drop down box have a little bit of a shadow behind it. So it's going to be somewhat subtle. These are just like the top of the box, the right side of the box, the bottom of the box, and the left side of the box. So I want it to mostly go to the right and to down. And then I can say, what color do I want that shadow to be? And I want mostly black, but maybe with a little bit of color to it. So I'm going to say something like that. And I think it's supposed to be, let me just try this. The 0.2 is the alpha. That's how visible the color is. Can we see that? That there's a, yeah. You can see that there's like the tiniest fading of a shadow behind it. You can see that's what it's trying to do right there. If you take this out and you do this, you'll see that it's very sharp around the edges. Look at the sharpness of the box. I put this in, and now I get a little bit of a fade on there, and it looks a little bit cleaner. So you can play with those numbers and get different looks if you want. The z-index is like, what order should it be in? Should it be on top of things? Should it be underneath things? I think it's behaving pretty well without the z-index, but it just makes sure that the whole box shows up on top of the navigation bar and doesn't get hidden underneath it at all. And then finally, you can change things like the font. Now, I had put in my font that I wanted one called Open Sans. That actually doesn't, it's not installed on these computers, so then I'm going to have to say any sans is also fine. Did that work? No, it didn't. Did that work? No. Weird. My fonts are not behaving right now. There we go. So it doesn't seem to really like the Open Sans necessarily, but Arial works, so maybe I'll stick to Arial. Okay, so that, we're coming along pretty well. We now have these drop downs. It's just that maybe these boxes don't look quite right to us. So there's a few little things that we can change to make them work a little bit better. The first thing is what happens when I go over each top of each one. Well, notice that it does change because they're still links, so they behave like links, but I might want to make some special changes to them. So for instance, what if I said, what happens to these links just in the nav bar when I hover? And I'm going to change their background color to a different color. And then I'm going to change the regular color to a different color. What I'm really doing here is I'm kind of flopping the two colors around. So now when I go over it, they do that, which looks better. Okay, just a couple more. What happens if I want to change my nav group when I'm hovering, but I want to change the actual button look? And so here I just change the background color of these. And now these change. See, they're a little bit weird because sometimes they're disappearing, but they are changing color. So then I could say, well, what happens if I want to change when I'm hovering? Not just the drop, but the links that are in the drop. And I want them to actually just be, you could copy and paste this. I want them to behave exactly the same way so that those pictures, those words don't disappear. Yeah, they're not supposed to. This one I have to treat differently. So there we go. That's pretty much it. No, those are still disappearing. How strange. I feel like I missed a couple things. So I'm just going to take a quick look and see if there's anything else I feel like I should change. I feel like this didn't come out exactly the way that I had it come out before. Well, I can see I made one mistake there. Remember before I said I might copy this and do something to it, so I think I'm going to make this and I sell it to a, yeah, that's what I wanted. I wanted to affect the A tags that are inside the buttons. So that's a big part of what I wanted. Now they're looking better. The other thing I want is, like, right now these are only changing when I put my mouse on them as a whole, and I kind of want them to change the entire piece. What I do is I have to think just logically, and I have to say to myself, well, what happens if I am hovering over an entire nav item? So here's my nav item hover. Because here I say what to hover when I'm doing my link, but I want to change it. So basically, again, it's another copy paste. Now I want these to act exactly the same way as the text themselves. I think I do. Maybe that'll make the links disappear completely. No, see, yeah, that's better. It's weird because I say the color should still be beige, but they're kind of disappearing when I go over them. I also want them to be a little bit bigger, and that would be something like here I could change the size of them. So maybe it's just that I didn't make them as big as I wanted them to be. Yeah, there we go. That looks better. Part of that is because the font I thought I was going to be using is not quite the same. But that's it in a nutshell. Um, Everything works, and then you could tweak it to make it work for you based on your colors. So I hope you enjoyed it.